Are we all happier as a result of it? Yes. Yes, I feel we are. So I have to give you, I have to do a caveat here going into this talk, because in the first service when I presented this talk, there was a voice that spoke up during the service, and it said, "I don't understand what you're trying to say." Am I right?
Yes.
It was. And then it turned out it was Siri, the voice of Siri. How many people know the voice of Siri? Have an iPhone, anyone? So I've instructed that iPhone to be turned off. And you can see me after class if you don't understand. That was so funny. Denise has an iPhone, so we're driving in a car, usually with all the noise that's, the whoosh and everything. Siri has a hard time understanding. And so we get these wonderfully erroneous responses from Siri. And then Denise gets frustrated and gives some erroneous or worse responses back to Siri. And then Siri gives some even more heated responses. And, well, do you realize we're talking to a robot? And you have to go, oh, wait a minute, I've got to come to myself here. So anyway, hopefully this message makes sense if you're not a robot. If you are a robot, you will understand what Siri was saying. Or you won't. We have a runaway child. Oh, there's a parent. Oh, good. Okay, so we have been talking for several weeks now about embracing change, yes? Yes. And it felt like it was more than we could just digest in one morsel of a Sunday. So the feeling that change being what it is it's sort of this ongoing process. It felt like this series needed to be an ongoing addressing of what it's like to deal with change. And as the feedback that I'm getting from so many of you is that these messages are landing squarely where you are, which tells me that change is that constant, right? That it's always happening. And even though we covered this in the first Sunday, this idea that change is this changeless constant. In other words, we can rely on change to be that which is going to visit us repeatedly and chronically and constantly throughout our life. Even though we acknowledge that that is true intellectually, somehow we're still upended, we're still thrown off, we're put on tilt, right? By certain, does anyone know what being thrown on tilt is? You have to be an older person like me to understand what that means. Anyway, but to be kind of thrown off of kilter and to be disoriented and to be shocked and dismayed and maybe downright indignant when certain changes come into our life. Now, of course, that's the human response. And we're not here to try to dehumanize ourselves and become a robot, for example. But we are here to see if we can recontextualize what we know to be the expected, yeah? Where we can begin to create some sense of expectation of how change is going to visit us in this life. We don't know when it's going to happen and where it's going to happen. We don't know what part of our life it's going to touch. We don't know the severity of it, and there is no guarantees. And all those of us who feel like we would love to go to a psychic or have some crystal ball so that we could see that change coming, and we could get all ready for it. I think we're missing the point of the spiritual journey that we are here for. And that spiritual journey is for us to be able to develop the capacity, yes, in order to embrace the changes that are bound to come in the human life. And to embrace it in such a way that it's not seen to be something that is against us spiritually, but it is the catalyst for our growth, and not in some Pollyannish, kind of new agey kind of way of saying, oh, it's just all good, without some recognition of what the nature of that good is. And the nature of that good for you and I, when we really get really down to it, when we really reach the depths of who we are, we understand that we are being called to express more of who we truly are and to call up the resources. And the spit's flying out of my mouth today. This is a really good sign, I can tell you. It's a sign of the Holy Spirit. Holy Spirit spit that is happening right here and right now. We have the buffer zone right here. Anyway, we're getting new carpet because of me. What was I saying? Anyway, so there's this idea that this stuff can be the catalyst for our spiritual growth if seen in that light. But if it's seen in a way that is somewhat, adverse to our well-being, then there's only one thing we can do with it, and we do it all the time. What is that? What is that? Push it away, right? Or to resist it. And to really argue with reality. Has anyone ever argued with reality? In other words, arguing with what's going on in life. Has anyone done that? Yes. Just me and you guys. And so what happens when we argue with reality? We suffer. I suffer. I have stories. And I won't share them all with you today. But you have stories too. So the aspect of change that I want to look at today is what's known as the void, sometimes called the wilderness, and more humorously called the hallway, right? So the hallway is, let me give you the quote that you've heard before, but with a little ending that you may not have heard. We've heard this one: when one door closes, another one opens. But it can be hell in the hallway. Yeah. We like the beginning part of that. Remember that? One door closes, then another one opens. Oh, I love that. But no one ever tells us what the time frame is between the closing of the one door. Where is it? When does it open? When does this, we don't know how long is the hallway of life. And that is where the rubber meets the road of our own spiritual growth, or the depth of our suffering. Can anyone say amen to this? Amen. Yes, we know this. So the hallway is that place between an ending and a new beginning. It can be the place between jobs, yeah? It can be the place between relationships. It can be during a major illness when there's an ongoing process of waiting for recovery to happen. It can be after a permanent change of some kind or a crisis in our life. And it's just life as you know it has ended, but you're just not sure what's coming next, right? Just can't quite see it. So every one of us spends time in the hallway. And either you or somebody you know is going through one of these conditions. Someone you love has died. A child is leaving home. A baby is on the way. A medical test is pending. A scary diagnosis has turned life upside down. A new marriage is on the horizon, or a divorce is fresh. You're going through unemployment, or bankruptcy, or foreclosure. You're being forced to move, or you're choosing to move. You're changing jobs or retiring. How many people in this room know someone, including yourself, is going through this? Yes. These are the universals. And yet, we still do not embrace change, even though everyone in this room knows that these kind of major things happen in life. But before I get too down, I want to share a couple of things with you. Sometimes hallways look worse than they are. Yeah? We might dread them and resist them and resent them and avoid them with far more energy than it would take to move through them. That's what we're here to talk about today. A couple of examples from stories. Terry Anderson, do you remember the reporter who was held hostage in Lebanon and for nearly 7 years? Remember that guy? He says, it would be a shame if I went through that experience and didn't change. Wow. I had lots of time to think about who I am, what I believe, and what's really important to me. And the fighter pilot Charlie Plumb, who was shot down and held as a prisoner of war in Vietnam for 6 years, he first considered it a colossal waste of time. Could we relate? Doesn't it sometimes feel like it's just a waste, this time? What is it good for? But he said years later, he called it a beautiful gift. A gift, he said, trapped in an 8 by 8 foot cell not knowing whether he would live from day to day, he said nothing could have taught him more. There's great value in getting blown out of the sky once in a while, Plum said in a speech. Now he's speaking metaphorically, obviously, for all of us. There's a great value in that wake-up call that forces you and me to re-examine the way we're doing business. Said a little differently, adversity is a horrible thing to waste. Khalil Gibran said this: could you keep your heart open in wonder at the daily miracles of your life, your pain would not seem less wondrous than your joy. And you would accept the seasons of your heart even as you have always accepted the seasons that pass over your fields. Could we but keep our heart open for all of the miracles of life, then we would find that the pain just as wondrous, because we understand that there is nothing and nobody against us. And in the context of that truth, which comes from our basic tenet in unity, which is there's one presence, one power in the universe, not two, not one power of good and one power of evil that's trying to do us in, that's trying to test us, that's trying to make us, make us suffer. There's no, I can't think of the word, but it's a good one. There's no evil, there's no evil God notion. There's no capriciousness in the divine. There's no, I'm happy with you today, I'm not happy with you, tomorrow. There's none of that shifting. There is only this love, presence, power that is seeking to express itself through us in the good times and in the times that we would rather not see. Even in the nightmare times. Even when we experience the absolute deepest, darkest moments of our life, when we experience the deepest, hardest losses, there still is only one presence, one power, one life, and it's seeking to know itself through its creation. And you are its creation. You are, I think Gary Simmons says this, Dr. Gary Simmons says, you are you are the way of God, or you're in the way of God. In other words, either you are this instrument that's open and receptive and embracing and having, like Gibran said, the embracing of the heart to all of what's happening to life, or you're obstructing the intention of the universe to have its way through you. That divine order might be made known through you. That you might be in the field of a peace that passes human understanding. That you might have the extraordinary experience of knowing something is still okay, even when everything on the surface is chaotic. Yeah? That you might know that even when people seem to be in your face, that there is a sense of love that never leaves you. Can you imagine this happening when life was just going along swimmingly? Could we ever learn the lesson of unconditional love if everyone was just smiling and happy and joy with us all the time? Could we ever? Would we ever have to dig any deeper than just responding to the superficial with the superficial? Could we ever really learn that the peace is not a condition that is conditional? If we were not confronted with conflict, if we were not confronted with that which seemed to be opposing us, if we were not confronted with wars and rumors of wars throughout the world, would we ever delve and dive deep enough into this place of knowingness within us if life was always showing up according to our preferences? I ask you, would we? I don't know anybody who does that, except for those extraordinary few, perhaps, that just come in here with that knowing. And unless you're one of those people, most of us find that this coming to knowing our true self is an exfoliation process. It's of letting go of what we are not, and yet one more layer. And one more process of subtraction that, like Meister Eckhart said, that knowing God is a process of subtraction. It's not adding anything unto us. There's nothing that needs to be added to you. You are already made in the image and likeness, and you are the expression and the extension and the very demonstration of love itself, of God itself, of the divine itself. So nothing can be added. God's work in you is done. God's work in me is done. And so my job is to find a way to be with life in such a way that I can allow the events of life that seem to be the most difficult to be spiritual and evolutionary drivers in my experience that push me to be more of who I have come here to be, to force me to dig within the hallowed halls of consciousness and to draw up something that's truer than what's appearing. Something more real, something more lasting, something that doesn't rise and fall. Doesn't rise and fall with the stock market and rise and fall with people's opinions, with the latest poll of, whether my life is working or my life is not working, or she loves me or she loves me not, That's the ego's plan. And the ego is frantic all the time and trying to get all the ducks in a row and the plates to spin, and it's just a frantic activity. Does anyone know this? And then to hold back any negative changes at the same time. It's like, oh, none of that and more of this, and we're just running around like, heartless robots. We're just reacting to life. And the masters teach something much more subtle. The masters teach not judging by appearances. Huh? You know what Jesus said? Judge not by appearances, but by righteous judgment. Meaning, righteous judgment meaning judging from a place of knowing, not from a place of reacting. From a place from the well of our own well-being that is already established in us. This is why we came. This is why I'm here on this planet. For me to learn that that's what I'm made of. To learn that at the core of my being, I am spiritual stuff. And it can't be diminished. It can't be reduced. It can't be taken away. There's a part of you that's never been hurt. There's a part of you that's never been hurt. There's a part of you that's never been diminished. There's a part of you that's never been disturbed. And that part of us remains sometimes under the radar of our own awareness until life, sometimes, the earth beneath our feet, the earth beneath our ordinary life begins to shake and shift and tremble. And then it's easy for us to forget that despite all of that seismic activity in our life, that we're still standing on holy ground. Still standing on holy ground. The land upon which we stand. Wherever we are, God is. And not God is up here somewhere, preparing to show us the rainbow after a particularly stormy night. But God is, as an indwelling spirit. Jesus said, I do not leave you comfortless. I leave you with the Spirit, the indwelling, the kingdom of God within. And that is the place upon which we can stand in the midst of the ground shaking beneath our feet. So when we're in the hallway, we may see differently. And Robert Brummett, I want to read something from his book, Finding Yourself in Transition. We've been stealing from for the series. Talks about a time when, in the winter, when he was going through his own void experience, his own hallway experience. He says, I was walking through the woods on a winter day, when I noticed how stark and barren was the naked forest, standing amidst the snow-covered earth. There was a quiet sadness present in the woods, a sense of emptiness. Yet I was struck by the unique beauty of the winter forest, and by the fact that I could now see much farther and more clearly than I could amidst the summer's lushness. I then realized that in this winter of my life, this time of emptiness, I had the opportunity to see more clearly that which was hidden from my former view. In the emptiness, we are given to see that which is not visible to eyes veiled with familiar surroundings. In the emptiness, we are given to see that which is not visible to eyes veiled with familiar surroundings. Think about how many people have ever gone off on a retreat of any kind? Many of you. When you go off on a retreat, aren't you intentionally creating a void in your life? I mean, don't you go out of your way to clear your calendar, to clear away all of those things that otherwise occupy your time, your attention, your energy? And for what reason? So that you can see more clearly, yes? Because it's all of these distractions that we have in life, our phones and our emails and all that, all of those things are constantly preventing us from being still, from being quiet, so that we might be able to see what we otherwise would not see when our life is filled with all those distractions. So when we're in the hallway, when something major has changed, we suddenly are looking at this blank slate of a life in front of us. And as I was sharing with this gentleman between services, it can be, the question we can ask ourselves is, what can I see now in this situation that I could not have seen before? What now has been cleared from the occluded perception that I normally walk around with, which is the next task, right? Or the next familiar thing, or this next step on the road that I know so well because I travel it every day. When those things are not in place, when that person is not there who's always there for you, or that sense of job security or financial security is not there for you, what are you uniquely now qualified to see? What vista, what vision, what perspective opens up? Because that's why you've gone off on retreats. And if you can look to the hallway as a retreat, you're in better business, yes? You have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to use those situations in life to extract a vision that otherwise we could not see. And the people who do not take that opportunity are the people that suffer. And we're not here to blame or judge anyone who suffers. We're just here to offer an alternative. Yeah? That there is an alternative to suffering. So in my own personal experience, I shared this with this congregation a few years ago, but I'll share it with you again because it fits here. And that is that I was going through a wilderness experience about 15 years ago. And it had to do with leaving one ministry and knowing for sure that the next door would open to the new ministry, just in a matter of course, because I thought a lot of myself. I thought everyone's going to want me. And that's not what happened. So there was a period of applying and getting rejection letters, and applying and getting rejection letters, or applying and being accepted to come and speak and share and try out and do all this stuff, and then getting a rejection letter. And this happened over the course of a number of months. And Denise and I were homeless at the time. We left our home. We stopped paying the rent. We moved on. We went up to Lake Tahoe to camp for a few weeks, and we didn't have a place to live when that camp reservation was let out. This was a void, folks. This is a void, and we did not avoid it. We embraced it, but not so beautifully. So what happened in that time is Denise ended up getting a part-time position, and I was working in a gym, handing out towels. and I was making $6 an hour. And all of those voices were coming in on me, like, there's been a cosmic mistake here. Something's gone awry with the divine plan. Do you hear me? You know this one? Arguing, resisting, angry, frustrated, confused, bewildered, sad, and then depressed. I ran the gamut. Does anyone know this? When you argue with life, you just can't imagine. And you have all these great reasons that you're right about why it shouldn't have happened. And no one will disagree with you, except reality. So, one day, I was hiking with our young son, who was about 8 years old at the time. And I was hiking up on the hills above Emerald Bay in Lake Tahoe. And we had hiked for a while, and our little son Nathan said, "Can we rest?" And I said, "Sure." So we found a flat rock to sit down on. And as we were sitting there, my eyes fell upon this little tiny fern that was growing out of a little crack in this big slab of granite. And a moment ago I said, sometimes when you're in the hallway, you see things that you otherwise would not see. And I swear I would not have noticed this little, sort of insignificant little piece of foliage. But I was struck in this moment with a vision to see the significance of what I was witnessing. And I began to process in mind this idea of how this had happened, that through the outrageous winds of misfortune, this little seed from the fern family had gotten blown up instead of blown this way, and landed up on top of this mountain, and had fallen into this deep crack. And my thought was, I just wonder how did it go through all these machinations that I'd been going through of, oh, my most privileged seedling brothers and sisters, who landed so fortuitously in the loamy, fertile soil of the forest floor, while I, getting the fickle finger of fate, had me tossed up on this rocky, barren place. And now, here I am in deep doo-doo. What to do? And how much complaining and resisting and kvetching and pushing back and how much sadness and how much, why is this happening to me? Of course, we know there was none of that. That this little seed stayed connected to its divine DNA, its natural imprint, which was to do what it was encoded to do, regardless of where it found itself. To grow is not a condition that only applies to certain conditions. And so it did what it was coded to do. It sent down the tendrils of its own little roots to begin to absorb the nutrients in the soil of where it found itself. And by drawing from the soil of where it found itself, it found that it had the ability to actually be nourished in that unlikely spot, and to begin to do what it was absolutely possible for it to do, which was to become a miracle. And so all that happened to me in a very short time. And that little fern plant changed my life. Because it was from that moment that I saw that I was just like that seed. That through the circumstances of life, I had found myself in a crack. And I went home and I quickly wrote a talk called Growing in the Cracks of Life. And I then offered myself to share this message with people, whoever would have me, churches and spiritual communities. And hundreds, perhaps thousands of people have heard that message and have been changed. All because I was willing to recognize through this brilliant little teacher that it does not matter what happens to us. The divine plan is never defeated by circumstances. The divine potential is never limited by situations. The divine plan is for you to grow and to know who you are and who you've come here to be. And it doesn't matter what happens. I mean, we know the story of Jesus and his whole journey. You know, if it was all about life going swimmingly along and manifesting all of your reality and creating all of the outcomes that you can possibly envision of being your perfect life, then why are we talking about Jesus after 2,000 years? Why are we talking about someone who could easily say the divine plan went horribly wrong? He was cut down at 33 years of age when he could have gone on to have a fabulous ministry with a big, tall steeple and a whole bunch of people. But what we're talking about is not the success in the outer that Jesus demonstrated. We're talking about the success that he had within him and how he said that these things that I have done, so shall you do. Because that seed of the divine is within you. And the possibility for transformation, for growth, to become the miracle in the midst of adversity is just as powerfully seated in you as it was in any spiritual being. And the only difference is how we look at it. Whether we see it as an adversity that's there to limit us and to keep us down, or we see it as a spiritual opportunity to expand and to grow. Those are the only conditions, and they're all conditions of the mind or in the heart, that determine whether our life becomes a living miracle and an inspiration to others, or it becomes just one more sad story. That part is up to us. That's our part. That's my part. It says in Proverbs, trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not into your own understanding. That's a big one for us. We think our understanding should be leaned into. But trust in what? Not trust in some external power to somehow, extricate us from some desperate situation. No, not that kind of trust in God. But trust of the Spirit of God within you and I that's seeking to know itself in and through life, wherever we find ourselves. And always acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. And sometimes those paths are going up the side of a mountain with an 8-year-old and seeing a little fern growing out of a crack. Or maybe it's 8 years in a POW camp. Or maybe it's a loss of a loved one, or a divorce, or a bankruptcy, or something. But all of those conditions can be the catalyst for our own awakening. Do we get this? Do we know this is possible for us? I believe it is. Namaste.